I really appreciate this conversation. And I was telling the producers when we talked about booking this show that I wanted to have a genuine conversation, not a debate. Because I think that people are used to just clapping back and yelling at each other. But I want the audience to really hear what it is you have to say. Because most black people, I'm going to wager, not all obviously, but most black people don't get to hear conservative black people sort of say what it is that moves them in the way that they've moved. So here's my first question. What was it that led you to be Republicans?
Interesting question. So if I were to jump ball this one, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, extremely poor. Lights, gas, and water off at the same time. Mom addicted to crack cocaine. And I grew up in an environment which told me that if you were a Republican, if you were a conservative, quite simply, you were a racist. Point blank, period. It didn't matter who you were. That's just what I was taught. So me ever wanting to evaluate or explore the ideology of a conservative was something that was totally off base until one day, having a conversation with an African-American gentleman who was senior, challenged my points of view. Then I went and researched and discovered that the Republican Party was actually started in 1854 in opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which wanted to expand slavery. Every civil rights bill that was passed in part due to Republican support, including LBJ's 1964 Civil Rights Act. Now we know that the Senate Democrats didn't want to necessarily support it, but Senate Republicans did help make that happen. So there were some things that really appealed and resonated to me. And then months of depression hit. How could I be one of these people? How could I be a racist? And then I'm in front of you, so I guess I did something right. Perhaps.
Corin, how did you, first tell me, is there a difference between being a Republican and being a conservative? Are they the same thing? Can you be a Republican and not be conservative?
No, I don't think you can. I'm a Republican, so I'm very, and what that means to me is being very involved in my party, both locally and on a statewide level, in every aspect, where, you know, it comes to, you know, our platform committees, so when things like that are being discussed, I like to be present and at the table.
So you're active in the party?
Yes, I'm very active within the party.
Okay.
So that's what it means to me to be a Republican.
So Rita, how did you, from Compton, how did you end up being a Republican?
Growing up in Compton, we actually grew up in a conservative household with conservative views. Christians, stood on the Word of God.
Amen.
And my grandfather and my grandmother were like my parents, and they taught me the ways to go. Voted Democrat for many years. My uncle, a police officer, retired now, is the one that started teaching me about we've been blind and brainwashed, and voting for a party that keeps us in poverty, has us voting for food stamps, independency, and there's no growth. We don't even own a lot of businesses in the Compton area as black people. And it has changed, and it's getting worse all over California. So I stepped in because the policies that Trump supports, as for Christians first, that are being attacked.
Now, I want you to finish. I'm going to push you on some of this.
Okay.
And when I do, let me just say to all of you, I just want to represent what the audience may or may not be thinking, right? So that we can have a fuller conversation and people won't think that that you're just up here, you know, prognosticating for the Republican Party. Yeah, because I think that this is a very, first of all, what a lot of people don't realize is that Martin Luther King's father was a Republican his whole life.
Yes.
Dr. King grew up a Republican.
Yes.
And most people don't realize that most black people in America were Republicans
Yes.
until 1965,
right.
when the voting rights bill was passed,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And the Southern Dixiecrats, right?
Yes.
They moved over to the Republican Party,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, no,
That's
no, no.
not-
No, that's
Yeah,
not
people,
true.
People mention this,
No.
and first and foremost, let's talk about the reason why LBJ was so interested in continuing to push the
But hold on a
legacy
second.
of John
So,
Kennedy.
but
with the
Dixiecrats
civil
did
rights-
not move to the Republican Party?
So let me finish. First and foremost, LBJ said he wanted to keep these N-words voting Democrats for 50 years. Let's be very clear about
Yes.
that. The second thing
Oh,
is,
he's no
you're talking
angel.
about, I'm sorry?
I said, yeah, he's no angel.
Well, okay, fair enough, and we agree. I'll concede that point. So the point is, though, you talk about the Dixiecrats and this big switchover. There were some people that moved over, but they make it out to be some mass exodus, as if Republicans just changed over, or Democrats just changed over. That isn't true. I don't know any research to back that point of view that Democrats have been using to push a narrative in our communities for decades. Can you educate me on that? Here's an opportunity.
Yeah, it's called Google.
Google
And,
works.
it's called
And-
Google.
and there's different websites that practice different things.
And there are several, documentaries well, let's not get into that because I happen to think that a more interesting conversation is not to argue about Dixiecrats and Republicans of 1965. That's kind of pedantic, actually. It's much more interesting to figure out how is it that black people have gotten it wrong about the Republican Party. If the Republican Party isn't, because most black people see the Republican Party as a racist party, as a party that embodies a set of principles and values, though Christian conservative, but they have a very skewed, this is what's believed, a very skewed understanding of race.
Yeah. So
How did we get it wrong if that's not the case?
So what I've learned from a good friend of mine named Kit Carl Smith, who is the founder of Frederick Douglass Republicans, and what he has said to me is that most black Republicans moved to the Democrat Party or started voting Democrat in the late 60s when the Republican Party nominated Barry Goldwater. So a lot of the black Republicans, like Jesse Jackson, Jackie Robinson, Martin Luther King, and others, were stomping for Rockefeller. And the Republican Party nominated Barry Goldwater as their nominee. So now Barry Goldwater voted against the Civil Rights Bill. And so that was very upsetting to them. And Jackie Robinson came out in the newspapers and he condemned the Republican Party and the way he was, and you can Google this, and the way he was treated at the Republican Party that at the convention that was held in San Francisco. And then Martin Luther King took to the newspapers and said, while Barry Goldwater may not himself be a racist, but him voting against the Civil Rights Act is basically, and I'll paraphrase, is not in our best interest. And we, as black people, need to rethink voting for a party who can nominate such an individual. And with that, I mean, it was a call to black people. And he did so, in my opinion, rightfully. And so most black people then decided, let's start voting Democrat. And unfortunately, Dr. King did not make it and stay around with us long enough to tell people, okay, let's come back home to our party.
But I appreciate that.
Yeah,
And-
that
and
was
I guess what I'm missing is how is it that black people have maintained an impression of the Republican Party that I'm sensing all of you agree that is not the case?
If I may.
think I'm just going to
Go ahead.
I think it comes with that. I think it comes with the nomination of Barry Goldwater.
So no other
I don't
policy?
think
coming
most
out.
people don't know that history. I think traditionally people don't know that history. So I think for the audience right here, they may hear things that are said that are insensitive racially. And I think for a lot of us here, pretty much everyone here is black. We know how painful racism, institutional racism, segregation, all these things that our grandparents talked about, and some of us have even experienced today. We know what that feels like. And when you have a party, and I'm 100% conservative, who has not went out and outreach to the black community in a way to be in your face and say, what do you want me to do? Then almost I'm a stranger. So if the Democrats are continuing to pontificate on Republicans and associating them with racism, how could I not believe it? Because you haven't had a conversation with me. Now, this is the difference I believe in today. Now we have a party that's a bit more aware, and yes, we know that African Americans vote for Democrats at 90+% of the time. We get that. We have a new awakening, I believe. And that comes with people recognizing that we are a community of great influence, culturally, politically, any number of things. And now we have to own our power. Because there's a party that collects our votes. And I'll be honest, black lives don't matter to Democrats, black votes matter to Democrats.
That's true.
And with that being the case, we have a new opportunity to say, hey, Trump, you're in the White House, Democrats, you're over here. What are we going to get for our votes? Because for too long, we've been taken for granted. And I think that's where it's necessary for us to go into these communities, Inglewood, South Side of Chicago, wherever, and say, this is what I'm looking to do for you. And both parties must do that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yes.
I think both
Y'all can
parties.
clap on that one.
I agree.
I think.
Yes.
I think.
Wait, I got my book here. Take it for granted. We gotta get everybody a
I
copy.
think, Lord help me tonight. I think that I think you're absolutely right. I think both parties need to compete for that, and I think that's
They
a fair
should.
assessment.
They rightfully
yeah, I think
should.
that's true. So we do have an audience question.
We do.
Wonderful audience member.
Introduce us.
Hi, I'm
introduce
Roxanne
us-
Beckford Hogue. I'm a friend of Corinne's and on the Legacy Republican Alliance with her.
My vice
I'm actually an
president.
immigrant from Jamaica. So we too had a very healthy share of the slave trade, but I grew up completely different than in an American situation. And I think coming to this country, I too was like, oh, welcome aboard. Oh, Republicans are racist. Okay, move over here. And so that's not just a black people thing. Everyone has sort of bought into that. Part of the problem is that conservatism ends up being kind of quiet. I'll leave you alone.
Right.
You leave me alone. You mind your own business. So it's not just black people that think that, but much like Kamala Harris has been completely deserved by California's lopsided one-partiness. Like if Kamala had had to compete, I'm bringing it home. If
Bring it
Kamala
home.
had had to compete for the roles she had in California, between a split electorate, she would have been a better, stronger candidate.
Yes.
And if black people voted 50-50, 60-40, if there was some swing in there, you'd get both parties trying to solve problems
But
instead of taking you
here's
for
my
granted on the
pushback,
one
though.
end and ignoring you on the other.
She's promoting my book too.
Here's my pushback, though, not to you, but,
No,
but
it's
just
okay.
generally speaking. And first, thank you, for your comments and what you have added to the discussion. But I guess my pushback is, it's almost as if you're asking the audience to believe that black people are so naive and so seduced by Democrats that our view of republicanism or our view of the Democratic Party is completely untethered to reality, to policy, and to political prescription.
I don't believe that. I believe that, people, it's our human nature just to stay routine, go with what you know sort of philosophy. And when you use the word racist, that is such a polarizing word. Yeah. So a lot of people who are dissatisfied with the Democrat Party and dissatisfied with the way their community works, but they still keep voting in these politicians that don't do anything, it's the devil they know. And the devil they don't know, they've been told, is racist. So for them and for me, because I was a Democrat my whole life until 2009, I continued to vote for them. Because I thought George Bush was a racist. I thought, because that's what I heard on TV. That's what the media told me. Until I decided to, one day look for myself and look at the platforms for the Democrat Party, look at the platforms of the
But
Republican Party.
Can I push
of
a
course,
bit?
please.
See, because I think let's set the racism question
Okay.
aside for a second, and let's ask whether or not there's something in republicanism in its platform and its policy prescriptions that would make black people believe that the Republican Party happens to be on their side working for their agenda.
Can I ask you this question? And I think this is one in which we have debates in barbershops and beauty salons all over the country. So let's talk about modern day. For a lot of people in this room, perhaps, have been around during the Obama presidency. That's clear. Now, the question is, to your point, in terms of the policy, tethered to a particular policy, or policies that are beneficial to our community, what did President Obama do for black people? Targeted, what did he do specifically for black people?
Well, there are two ways I can answer that question.
Please.
The first way is, who cares about President Obama? He's not president.
Yeah, but we're talking
and we're not having
historically,
we're
we're
not,
talking
we're not having a discussion
holistically.
about President Obama.
But here's the thing, though. He was the leader of the Democratic Party. Black
Right.
folks voted for him over
we're talking
95% of the
about
time.
what
Why
policies,
can't we mention that?
what policy prescriptions do Republicans have that would attract black people and make black people believe that they're on the side?
The First Step Act. Thousands of people
So-
released from jail, 90% of them being
90%,
black.
yes.
Opportunity zones, 1.3 million black households impacted.
Yes.
Over 9,000
What else?
9,000 zip
So
codes.
those are some of the wonderful
Funding for
accomplishments.
HBCUs.
We got one.
Those are the great accomplishments of the
You don't think the First Step Act is important?
The
It's very
100
important.
billion,
Right.
the 100 billion that was back into the urban communities as well.
Say that again?
He has also put 100 billion back into the urban communities. That
President Trump?
yes,
Okay.
that revitalization, that black people that are in leadership.